From Northern Avenue in Yerevan, this is CivilNet's Daily News Digest. I'm Maria Titizian, and here are the top stories for Friday, March 28. Armenia in a league with nations who vote against Ukraine at the UN. Plus, Turkey now bans YouTube after yet another scandal. And later, our continuing coverage of Kesab and the relief efforts underway. Armenia has voted against a UN resolution reaffirming Ukraine's territorial integrity and calling the Crimean referendum illegal yesterday during a vote in the General Assembly. We had reported earlier that sources in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs had said that Armenia would abstain during the vote. The resolution was approved at the UN with 104, 11 against, with 58 countries abstaining. Along with Armenia, countries such as North Korea, Bolivia, Belarus, Sudan, Zimbabwe, and others also voted against the document, which essentially deems Russia to be the aggressor. Kazakhstan, which is part of the Russian-led customs union, abstained. Armenia's representative to the UN, Garen Nazarian, issued an explanatory note regarding Armenia's vote. Armenia has consistently and over the years taken a principled position on the promotion of democracy, freedoms, and rights, including and in particular the equal rights and self-determination of peoples as universal values and principles embraced by this assembly based on the UN Charter. Despite Armenia's decision to vote against the resolution at the United Nations, which was submitted by Ukraine, Ihor Roman, an advisor at the Ukrainian embassy in Yerevan, said that they will not be severing diplomatic relations with Armenia. Ukraine recalled its ambassador to Armenia for consultations in Kiev in protest over President Serge Sarkisyan's comments, which endorsed the referendum in Crimea. Roman said yesterday that no matter how Yerevan voted on Russia's annexation of Crimea at the UN, Ukraine would in fact maintain diplomatic relations. The presidents of Armenia and Azerbaijan met on the sidelines of the Nuclear Security Summit, which took place at The Hague, the Netherlands. The OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs James Warlick, Igor Popov, and Jacques Fauré, including personal representative to the OSCE chairperson in office, Andrzej Kasperczyk, had met separately with President Serge Sarkisyan and President Ilham Aliyev. James Warlick, the US co-chair of the Minsk Group, tweeted the following yesterday. The presidents of Armenia and Azerbaijan spoke together at The Hague at the NSS 2014. Are they really committed to finding a way to NK peace? Late yesterday, the Armenian president's spokesperson Arman Sagatelian, regarding the meeting, said, President Serge Sarkisyan spoke to the leaders of many countries, including Azerbaijan, on the sidelines of the two-day Nuclear Security Summit in The Hague. This is an accepted format of communication, usually not recorded in official reports. There has been this kind of conversation with President Ilham Aliyev of Azerbaijan. The European Neighbourhood Policy Progress Report that was released yesterday says that the EU is committed to cooperation despite Armenia's failure to initial the association agreement, including the deep and comprehensive free trade area last year. After years of intense negotiations with the EU, President Serge Sarkisyan opted to join the Russian-led customs union on September 3, 2013. The report says Armenia and the EU remained committed, nevertheless, to further cooperation as they jointly stated in the margins of the Vilnius summit. The report notes that visa facilitation and readmission agreements were both ratified in 2013 and entered into force on January 1 of this year. And while Armenia continued to address issues related to human rights and fundamental freedoms, further work remains necessary. The progress report was released by the European Commission as part of the 2014 European Neighbourhood Policy Package, which underlines key developments and reform efforts in 2013 and makes recommendations for the year to come. Nagorno Garapa is not, nor has it ever been, part of Azerbaijan. David Babayan, the press secretary of the president of Garapagh, said this after the Azerbaijan MFA press service representative's announcement that they will issue passports and visas, including Schengen visas, to residents of Nagorno-Karabakh. Babayan said that citizens of Garapagh already have passports and advised Azerbaijan to, quote, issue a visa to Safarov, send him to Europe so he again may be put in jail, since that is where criminals belong. Just to remind our viewers, Ramil Safarov is the Azerbaijani military officer who brutally killed Armenian Lieutenant Gurgen Markaryan with an axe in his sleep during a NATO Partnership for Peace program in Budapest in 2004. Safarov was extradited to Azerbaijan, where he was immediately released and received a hero's welcome. Armenian Defense Minister Seyran Ohanyan received the delegation of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly yesterday in Yerevan. During the meeting, Armenia-NATO cooperation and regional security issues were discussed. The sides exchanged views on areas of cooperation between Armenia and the North Atlantic Alliance in the field of defense, the contribution of Armenian peacekeepers to missions pursuing international stability and security were welcomed. Minister Ohanyan also presented Armenia's position on the settlement of the Karabakh conflict, stressing the importance of implementing confidence-building measures at the line of contact. We turn our attention to Turkey now, just after a court order backed by Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan to ban Twitter in Turkey made headlines in international news. Turkey has now moved to block access to YouTube. This comes after a leaked audio recording of Turkish officials discussing Syria appeared on YouTube. The leaked audio recording is of a meeting which appears to have been attended by Turkey's intelligence chief, its foreign minister Ahmet Davutoglu, and the deputy head of the armed forces, during which they discussed possible military operations in Syria. This leak comes as Turkey's prime minister faces important local elections on Sunday and corruption allegations towards his government. Under these circumstances, he has accused social media of spreading misinformation and had previously suggested that bans could be applied to both YouTube and Facebook. Currently, the hashtag YouTube blocked in Turkey has been trending worldwide on Twitter. On Wednesday, a court in the capital Ankara ordered the ban on Twitter to be lifted, but it could be weeks before the order takes effect. And now we return to our continuing coverage of the crisis in Kesab, Syria. A protest in front of the United Nations office in Yerevan was organized by the Nigol Akhbalian Student Association and the Armenian Youth Federation yesterday. The protesters handed a letter to the UN condemning Turkey's operations in Syria's predominantly Armenian-populated town of Kesab and demanded the safe return of civilians to their native village. Sergei Shipilov, the UN's Department of Safety and Security's advisor to Armenia, came out to meet with the demonstrators and received their letter. Armenia's parliamentary delegation, who had traveled to Syria to see firsthand the problems and issues with the displaced Armenians who were forced to relocate to Latakia, met with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad to discuss the future of the historic Armenian town. A member of that delegation, Levon Martirosyan, said, "We are now much better informed about the events unfolding in and around Syria. We exchanged views with the president. We reached an agreement that we will exchange the information we received to the Armenian leadership and, if possible, to the international community." He went on to say that the Syrian government is determined to establish peace and to fight against those groups which have intruded into Syria from foreign countries, including Turkey. The Syrian government does not differentiate between its citizens. Also, it will help the Armenian community to return to Kesab. There is a very positive attitude in Syria towards the Armenians. Members of the delegation also met with Speaker Mohammad Jihad al-Lahan of the People's Council or Parliament of Syria, who said that there are citizens of 3 countries, including Turkey and Azerbaijan, among the mercenaries who have infiltrated into Syria. In the early morning hours of March 21, armed militants from the Jabhat al-Nusra Islamic terrorist group infiltrated northern Syria's Latakia governorate, which is predominantly inhabited by Armenians and Alawites. About 600 Kesab Armenian families are currently sheltered in Latakia. Some are staying with friends and relatives, and the rest are being sheltered in the Armenian church. On March 23, Turkish fighter planes downed a Syrian military aircraft that was conducting a mission against the terrorists in Kesab. His Holiness Aram I Catholicos of the Great House of Cilicia has been actively engaged in the crisis in Kesab. He has sent 2 delegations to Latakia to do a needs assessment of the displaced Armenians and has had various discussions and consultations. His Holiness said that the Armenian Apostolic Church greatly appreciates the calls for support and solidarity from Armenia and throughout the diaspora, and said that it is now necessary to consolidate our capabilities and take concrete steps to extend immediate support to the Armenians. Financial support will be mobilized and coordinated through the Catholicosate in Antelias. A bank account has been set up for donations. Yesterday, His Holiness had a telephone conversation with Jeffrey Feltman, the Undersecretary General for Political Affairs at the United Nations. The latter assured the Catholicos that they are concerned with the security issue in Syria and are following the developments closely, and in this regard has been in contact with Lakhdar Ibrahimi, the United Nations and Arab League Special Envoy to Syria, and has also met with the ambassadors of Armenia and Turkey to the UN. His Holiness, after explaining the situation of the Armenians of Kesab, also underscored Turkey's involvement in the offensive. The exchange rate is up on your screen as we take a look at your forecast. Yerevan will be partly cloudy and will have a high of 18 and a low of 4. Gyumri will have a high of 11 and a low of 1. Stepanakert will see a high of 19 and a low of 6 degrees Celsius. And our travel forecast takes us to Serbia's capital, Belgrade, where the high will be 12 and the low 7. Armenians have been in Serbia from at least the 13th century. The first records of Serbia's Armenian population describe their impact on Serbian ecclesiastical architecture. In 1218, Serbian monk Saint Sava invited Armenian architects after his visit to Armenia. The Armenians eventually built the Vitovnica monastery, which has still preserved a bilingual Armenian-Serbian inscription. Before the Battle of Kosovo in 1389, Armenians were enlisted in the Ottoman army invading Serbia. However, upon hearing that their battle was against fellow Christians, the Armenians defected and fought alongside the Serbs. Surviving Armenians formed a community in the hills of Sokobanja, even establishing their own church, Germenjic. By the 17th century, records indicate that an Armenian community had been established in the city of Uzici. Between the 17th and 19th centuries, Armenians formed a class of wealthy merchants and artisans, and accordingly, the community grew to regional cities such as Gamach, Valijevo, Novi Sad. Valijevo has a particular Armenian connection as the residence of Khachadur Teliryan, father of Soghomon Teliryan. Khachadur was a coffee merchant and a member of the Valijevo trade union, and even today one can find his shop and residence. Today the Armenian community in Serbia is small, consisting of around 200 to 3,000 people, many of whom have recently immigrated from Armenia. Armenians have established their own organization called Armenka, where they run community fairs and projects. And that is our digest for this Friday, March 28. We leave you today with Joseph Derderian and the band performing Bugarski, a Serbian folk song. Have a safe and happy weekend, and I will see you back here on Monday.